Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today as we have this live recorded session titled When Holiday Reveals Care Needs for New Family Members. My name is Stacy Campbell. I'm an education and outreach specialist with Passages Caregiver Resource Center in Chico, California. And I am joined today by a co-host, and she will introduce herself, and we will go back and forth with a live interview style type of conversation. And at this point, I will let my co-host introduce herself so we can get started with the questions.
Hi there. Thanks, Stacy. My name is Stephanie Gunther. I am the Caregiver and Outreach Coordinator with Del Oro Caregiver Resource Center in Sacramento, California.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and kick off some of these questions that we already have prepared, Stephanie. What warning signs might families have seen during their holiday visits?
Well, I think it's important first, before we jump right into all of that, to say that the holidays bring stress and anxiety for a lot of people, no matter if you are, have a cognitive disease or a progressive disease. Um, but for most of us, those feelings ease or fade after the first of the year, right? After the holidays have calmed down. So, what we're going to talk about today are some of the things that we're going to go over. These are things that are typically, they go beyond the typical holiday stress, and it focuses on concerns that are out of the ordinary, right? And they're not usual for your loved one. So you may have had that interaction with them over the holidays, and you may have seen some physical changes, weight loss. There may have been some poor hygiene where there hasn't been before. Maybe there's new bruising. You noticed difficulty walking or frequent falls. Maybe there was some notices of cognitive changes like confusion, memory loss. Maybe you noticed that there was more medication than there should have been, or past due bills that were on the counter, things that haven't been taken
Hmm.
care of in the past. Um, there may have been some issues with home safety, right? So you may have seen more clutter than normal, spoiled food in the refrigerator, on the counter. Maybe you notice pots and pans that have burned bottoms, or it looks like there may have been a small, like maybe fire or burned things on the counter that are not typical, or broken appliances. Another sign may have been some emotional or behavioral changes. You may have seen them withdraw more, maybe be irritable, or um, showing a little more anxiety or depression than may have been typical. And then if there's a caregiver involved, that's also somebody to look at, right? So the caregiver strain.
Yes.
If you notice that there's the spouse or the caregiver feels or appears exhausted, overwhelmed, or unwell. So those are some signs that you may have seen, and I'm sure there's a lot more out there, but those are just some typical ones that we may have seen over the holiday.
Those are definitely typical. Some of your physical and medical changes, cognitive and behavioral changes, and the environmental signs.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to our next question. What should you do when you notice that there are new care needs for that family member?
Well, I think it's important. I think oftentimes, as a child myself, a grown adult, we want to jump in and handle the situation as quickly as possible. We see a need, we want to fix it. But I think it's important for us to pause before pause before we react. There we go. Um, One visit's not going to tell the whole story, so make sure that you're involved, and seeing, beyond what you just see. Investigate a little bit. When you see those care needs, you want to take notes on what you're seeing. Note any patterns um, that matter more than one incident. Um, Talk with your loved one privately and respectfully, right? You want to make sure that you're not approaching them in a way, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But you want to talk with them a little bit about some of the needs that you've seen, and see if they have, to start the conversation. It may also be important to schedule a medical appointment to rule out any treatable causes like a UTI or an infection, but also to see if there's, like, if there's new medications that are causing some of the
Hmm.
changes, and if there is a new diagnosis that needs to be made. Start small with those things, focus on one concern at a time, and then reach out for information and support early, and not during a crisis. So if you started seeing signs right now, it's important to reach out, um, now, act now, and establish that support and find those resources so you have those trusted options that you can lean on during those times of crisis. Um, Planning ahead can reduce that anxiety, ease some of the tension that comes along with it, and then lessen some of the fear of the unknown as you move forward through this process.
Yeah, I totally agree. People need to learn how to, like you said, calm down for one, but
Mhm.
learning how to have those resources and get to those resources before that crisis arises, because that's the thing. It seems like everything goes into that crisis mode. So I do think starting small is most definitely so.
And
Okay,
seeing,
moving on
being
to the.
aware.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm just
Go
saying,
ahead.
being aware of the of those changes and not just kind of dismissing them as small things. Um, Again, noting those things so that you can kind of see those patterns. So it's not that you get to that crisis moment where you need those services and supports. You have that already. You have some of that already set in place, or you know who you need to call in those moments.
Exactly,
Uh,
getting that care team.
yeah.
Yes, thank you. So, how about this next question? How can you talk to your loved one about safety or accepting help without causing conflict? Because we know that when you have family members, there's a lot of conflict and not everyone agrees with everyone. And so, what would you suggest in that case?
Well, it's a challenge. Communication and family dynamics are not easy for anybody. And we all have them no matter what family you're in. But also, when we're talking with our loved one and you're seeing them change, or they're who you're seeing them change, it's important for you to involve them in those decisions and in
Yes,
the conversation, right? So it may not necessarily be that they're gonna, what they say is gonna be the end all say all, but at least they've been heard and they've been involved in the conversation as much as possible, if it's possible. Um, that can help kind of ease a little bit into that transition as needed. Um, when somebody feels validated, when they feel seen and heard. So that's one thing. I think the
hmm,
other thing is making sure when you start those conversations that the time is right. Don't start the conversation at the dinner table when everybody's around and they're there to visit. Your loved one is there to visit. They're not going to, that's going to catch them off guard and feel like they're on the hot seat. And
right.
that can cause some conflict in itself. When you do talk with them, make sure it's calm. It's not a crisis moment, and both sides can be heard and validated. When you start the conversation, lead with concern and not criticism. So use I statements instead of you statements, like I noticed versus you can't. Um,
Yes,
and then ask open-ended questions and listen more than you talk. Just giving them opportunity to talk a little bit about what's going on, and so you can kind of see where they're at in their thought process too, and what they think the situation looks like, and what you've seen the situation to be, and then maybe you can come together on that common ground. Focus on those shared goals, like the independence, and most people want to stay independent as long as possible, and likely in their home as long as possible, right? Um,
yes,
so when you're focusing on that independence, how can you keep that independence? How can it be viable at home? Um, Look at safety and then quality of life, right? So when you're talking with your loved one, those are some things to think about. And then revisit the conversation. It's not one of those things that you're just going to have one conversation and that's the end of the situation. You're going to
hmm,
come up with a conclusion. Revisit those conversations, both with your loved one and other people in your family, so that you can help, uh, do what's best for the care receiver, the person, your loved one.
yeah. I do. You said that make sure that you include them in the conversation, and that's very important because that's some things that individuals, as they get older, they feel like they're being left out of a lot of things, and they feel like they're incapable, and nothing matters. Nothing matters what they say anymore, and they don't have an say into what their future is. So, yes, very good
It's
strategies.
important to maintain their dignity, right, as much as
Exact, and that's
possible. Even if a
that's
person has a disease, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not capable of making those decisions or being involved in the conversation. And I think that's where it starts at, being involved in the conversation. And
yes,
you're likely, when they're on your side or they feel heard and validated, um, it may lead to a better outcome.
Yeah, like you said, dignity is a very strong word when it comes to your elderly population like that. So,
Mhm.
all right, one of the next questions that we have, what are signs that it's time to bring in outside support or services?
It's a
When does that
challenge.
happen?
It's a challenge because they've had this conversation with you and they don't necessarily think that they need help, right? So I can do it by myself. I don't need anybody to come into my house. I'm a private person. Like those are all things that we hear often, right? And challenges that families encounter a lot of the times, especially when it comes to getting assistance in the home. Or another one that comes up a lot is you can just do it. You're my daughter. You're my son. You're my
Yes.
spouse. We can manage it together. The reality is that that's not always the case. And at some point, especially if it's a progressive disease, at some point, um, you're going to need that support. Um, so, what you can look for, what you may have seen during the holidays, just the safety risks that can't be managed by family alone, right? So, if your loved one starts to wander, if your loved one there's a lot of falls or frequent falls, if the disease itself has progressed to a point where you're no longer able to manage it reasonably, I think that's a big thing I'll talk about in a few minutes. But um, those are some things like safety that you can't necessarily manage alone. Um, Another thing would be care needs that interfere with work, your health, and your relationships. Right? I think caregiving is all about finding a balance. You're
Correct.
balancing the health and well being of the person that you're caring for on top of the health and well being of your own self. And so if you're not paying attention to one or the other, that balance is going to be off. So when you start to see that your person's care needs are interfering with you, and you're having to adapt or you're having to change some of what you're doing or give up some of what's important to you, um, it may be time for you to look for that outside support.
Hmm.
Um, Another sign may be frequent emergencies, hospitalizations, or other health
Yes.
conditions that progress and change. Um, Signs of caregiver burnout. So if you see maybe it's a spouse caring for their spouse and the caregiver is just at their max and they can't handle anymore, they can't do anymore, they're irritable, they have anxiety, depression, you see hygiene issues with them, they're isolating themselves. Those can be signs of caregiver burnout, and it may be time
Hmm.
for additional support.
Correct.
um, I have a couple more on that. And when we're talking about this, is when family members disagree or feel overwhelmed, it may be time
Hmm.
for additional outside support. Um, and then when care needs again exceed what the family can reasonably provide. I think as caregivers, we think a lot of times in the caregivers that I've worked with over the years, there's this idea that the caregiver themselves is has these superhuman powers, right? And
Correct.
they can do it all and they don't need the additional help and they don't need the support. And then one day they wake up and they're questioning how they got here and
Hmm.
knowing that they can't do it anymore. I think it's really important for us to have those reasonable expectations and like those lines in the sand for caregivers to know how far they can go without it jeopardizing their own health and well-being, without it jeopardizing the health and well-being of the person that they're caring for as well. So when these things or when these signs start to come up, it may be time for us to look at what additional support can be provided, whether that's in-home care, whether that's an adult day program, or maybe it's
Hmm.
time to look at potentially out-of-home care, right?
Yeah.
Long-term care in a facility, assisted living, or skilled nursing, that type of thing, memory care.
Yeah, like we were saying that having those resources there before that crisis arises, that's going to help you get your care team together, your support team when something does happen. So, and yeah, you did say that one thing that you said that struck me was you said that it seems like caregivers are the person who's the superhuman,
Yeah,
has it all and they don't have it all. They fail too, and they do need that balance. So
yeah.
that it is important to bring in outside help when it is needed. So when you do see that burnout. Okay, so how can families handle disagreements between siblings about what care is needed? We know we see a lot of that. I know I've seen that a lot when, just in the work that I've done in various occupations.
It's a challenge, and like I said before, we all have it. It's in all of our
Yeah.
families, whether we want to admit it or not. Um, and so, just kind of recognizing that that could be something that we come up against. Um, I think when we're working with siblings or other family members, it's important for us to keep focused on the loved one's needs and
Right.
not some of the past family dynamics that may have been there. We all have our own relationships with the person that you're caring for. Maybe my mom, but it's also my sister's mom. So just kind of keeping that in mind, like how I was raised may be different than how my sister was raised, um, but my mom's needs are still the same.
Yes.
She still needs X, Y, and Z. So keeping that and the tension that I may have between me and my sister, it doesn't belong in my mom's caregiving situation or in the situation
Hmm.
that we're providing care for my mom. Um, I think another thing that we can talk about is and try to stay focused on is that you want to share those observations and facts and not assumptions.
Yes.
Sometimes there's denial in the diagnosis from one sibling or another family member. They may not be around your loved one that often enough to see the changes on a regular basis. Whereas, if you're the caregiver who's living there, you see it 24/7 and you see the progression of the disease. Or it could be flipped. You could see that, like we were talking about, the caregiver having that mentality of I can do it all, but also not being able to do it at all, and the other siblings seeing into the situation from the outside, um, and saying that there is some challenges, and just kind of it's important for you guys to share equally, and not assumptions, not just that things are, you know mom needs to eat more fiber and drink more water.
Yes.
It could just be that there are some other physical things that are going on or mental things that are going on that need to be addressed, and it's not just as simple as let's drink more water.
Yeah.
um, Also, have realistic expectations about what you can reasonably contribute. I think that's where a lot of tension comes with, and resentment comes, because we think that, oh, they recognize, if I'm the primary caregiver and I'm caring for, so let's continue with this mom thing. Um, if I'm caring for my mom and my sister is seeing the situation through, conversations that we're having together about her, but I'm the one living with mom. Um, I think sometimes, we see that maybe my sister has this expectation that everything is okay, or they
Yes.
know what's going. We think that they know what's going on, but the reality is that she's not there all the time to know. And so if I'm not telling her some of those things that are going on, she's not able to help. So having those realistic expectations. I also know that my sister has kids. I don't have kids. And so that may not be something that she's able to contribute her time and energy into, because she has those things as well. Um, but she may be able to help with paying financially, depending on the situation, just knowing like what things you have available to be able to offer to the caregiving situation and what I have. Together we may be able to provide a lot more to mom um, than just one person. But
Yes.
also, you don't want to stress that situation out anymore either by putting that expectation on them, and then they're not able to meet that expectation, and now I'm resentful because they're not meeting that expectation. But it wasn't realistic to begin with. They're not. If they live a couple hours away, there's no way that they would
Yes.
be able to be there all the time, or to know that I need a break. Um, Also, divide tasks again realistically based on availability and strengths. And then if some things are not able to be talked through without there being tension, maybe that's an opportunity for you to bring in a third party, a neutral third party. So, like a care manager or a social worker or family consultant. It may be time for a family meeting, and having somebody else manage that meeting may be helpful in kind of coming up with goals and ways to move forward in the caregiving situation. And then lastly, with this one, is just to keep a document of these agreements available and revisit it as things change so that everybody is on the same page, that we know that on Tuesdays and Thursdays, um, I'm not going to have to cook dinner for mom because my sister is going to bring it over. Or,
Mm.
they're going to take care of that. Or I'm going to have a 4 hours break on Sunday so I can go to church, whatever it is. But keep that document fluid so that everybody can see it and that it can be updated as needed and as things change.
Yeah, thank you. You know, one thing you said was it struck with me when you said, even though it's my mom, it's also my sister's mom. And there's so many times when in family dynamics when you start seeing people who are, especially I think the one who's taking care of the individual, that it ends up being my mom
Yeah,
because the other individuals in the family are not there to see what has been going on with mom, you know. So
exactly.
it is having to have those conversations and you said bring somebody in if you need to, but the most thing you want to do is stay centered on your loved one's wishes, I would probably say. So,
And needs, yeah, for sure.
yes, thank you. Yes. Okay, so what are some local resources families can turn to right away when new needs come up? This is a big one. Avoiding
Yeah,
that
I
crisis.
mean, exactly. And I think if you're not already connected to a caregiver resource center like ours, or yours, or there's 11 of us in California, definitely getting connected with a caregiver resource center would be my first step, and getting that support to kind of help with the getting you on the path to being able to provide the best care for your loved one.
Hmm.
Um, Another step would be to talk to the, and this one maybe for the caregiver, is to talk to your primary care physician and or a specialist for assessments or referrals. If there's been any changes to the disease or if there needs to be a new diagnosis, definitely stay in communication all the time with your medical team.
Yes.
Um, the Area Agency on Aging can also be good help in offering counseling referrals and care options. 211 is another good resource to have. They can help with housing, food, and transportation, and any other like local resources that may be helpful for you. I know if you call 211 in our area, they'll direct you to Del Oro, um, and I'm sure that's the case across the board. Uh,
Correct.
Again, the caregiver resource centers, and we provide that education. Family consultants can give those consultations. Support groups. We also offer referrals to other community resources that can help support the caregiver and the care receiver maintain the care at home. And then there's some home health agencies and private caregivers for short-term help. Um, Adding to that, there's also adult day programs and opportunities. Sometimes, depending on your county and the place, there may be opportunities for short-term respite stays as well.
Hmm. And some places have geriatric care managers as well
Yes,
that you can always, you know, lean on, depend on. But I would probably say the most important thing is making sure that you communicate with your physician because your
yes,
physician and his assistants are most likely going to have the resources and the information that is needed for those
exactly,
individuals.
exactly.
Okay, so moving on to our next question. How can families stay proactive and prepare for after the holidays? You kind of brought up after the holidays a little bit in the
Yeah,
beginning. So,
and the start of the new year, right? This is a great opportunity to start new, to start fresh.
mhm,
Continue the conversations, I would say, that you have started over the holidays with your care receiver, or the person, your loved one, and or other family members, and start planning. Schedule some of those medical appointments, cognitive checkups, review any of the medications that you have at home, and any home safety things that you may have seen over the holiday. Um, I would review any of those things, see if it's time for you to pull up those the throw rugs on the floor, or if it's time to
yes.
rearrange some furniture so it's more safe for mom to walk around, that type of thing. And then identify a family point person for communication. So if there's not an identified primary caregiver, or somebody's deciding that they're going to step in a little bit more and help with, managing doctor's appointments, managing medications, managing kind of some of the changes and being more hands-on than some other people in the family, identify that if you don't have, I haven't already identified that person. Again, learn about community resources that are out there, and try to connect with them before that crisis happens. Um, just really learning and being proactive, even if it's just about building up your toolbox, and you have these tools
Hmm.
in your toolbox, but you don't never use them. At least you have them in case something does happen and you know where to
Correct.
reach out to. Um, and then check in regularly. Don't wait till the holidays to do it. Check in with the person who may have the disease or who may have some ailment that is needing assistance. But also check in with the caregiver. If there is a primary caregiver, if dad's taking care of mom, check in with dad. How is dad doing?
Yes.
Has he, had an opportunity to take a break? How's his own health? Has he been able to go do what brings him joy? Maybe it's fishing, maybe it's golf, maybe it's whatever it is for him. But check in with him. He's still he's still your dad. He's still a person that needs to take care of himself, and he still needs those relationships outside of that caregiving situation. So whether it's your dad, whether it's the husband or wife or whatever it is, the care partner, it's really important to connect with them as well.
Yeah. One of the things you said at the beginning, you talked about UTIs
Yeah.
and UTIs in elderly people. I've worked in throughout home health and senior living, and the first thing when someone was not their same, it was always get them tested for UTI. A lot of
Yes.
times we would call family members working, I worked in assisted and independent, and a lot of times individuals bring their loved one and they kind of, they put them there because they know that there's activities going on, there's just a lot going on. They're going to be fed, apartments are going to be clean, but at the same time, you still need to have that communication with the people who run the facility in the community because they're the ones that are seeing that your loved one every day. So
Yeah,
most definitely, and that's what we
exactly.
would always say. Hey, maybe you need to go get mom or dad checked for UTI, and you can call your physician right over the phone and do what you need to do. So yeah, communication is most definitely a big thing. So all right, so I would say some of the next steps that a family member could take would be make a list of changes that you've been able to observe,
Mhm.
share your observations with your siblings and your trusted family members, have a calm, safety focused conversation with your loved one, as much calm as you could as it could be,
Yeah.
schedule a wellness check with their primary physician. That's one thing that I think a lot of individuals is you go back and ask when was the last time mom or dad was seen by a physician. Oh, it wasn't too long ago, but not too long ago was a year ago.
Yeah.
And the way things go now, especially when you want services from a physician, they want you to see a physician at least every 3 months so that that is documented. So that's something that you need to make sure that you keep those wellness checks with your primary physician. Explore care options early, even if it's small support. Small support makes a big difference. So just having that one little piece of paper when you went to a health fair
Yep.
maybe something that's going to help you get resources further and further and further long as the time goes, and connect with local agencies to build a new network, caregiving network. You say?
I would say the last thing that I would say, and I talk a lot about this in some of the education that we do and with my own clients, is we say it a lot with kids. It takes a village to raise a
Right.
child, but it also takes a village to support a caregiver, and that support comes in
Hmm.
so many different ways. And the more support that you have around you, the more support you're going to have as you go through this caregiving situation or a caregiving journey. And you never know when you're going to need that support. But if you have that kind of in your back pocket, you can call them, um, who you can call at what time of the day if you need to call,
Hmm.
what doctor to call, what family member to reach out to, what in home care agency you need, all the things, right? If you can create that list, and start that support now before it gets to that crisis point where you're just setting yourself up for a lot more. It's a better situation than to make some of these choices in a crisis moment. So
Correct. I do agree.
definitely have that village to support you.
Yes. Thank you. Those are all the questions. Okay. Have some questions from the audience.
All right.
How does one deal with a step parent that is in denial of your dad or mom's declining health?
that is a tough situation. It's one of those challenging family dynamics, right? And denial is a big thing, especially with people that you love. You don't want to see that that's what's happening. And it may be that it's a small conversation. It may be that it's a offering to take the loved one to the doctor yourself.
Correct.
And it may be reaching out to other family members who can help, who have a different relationship with that step parent, so that they can help kind of have the conversation as well. Stacey, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I would probably say just keeping that open communication, like you said, making sure that you take that individual along with you when you go, because sometimes people think you're hiding things from them
Mhm.
and you're actually not. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And having the doctor be involved in those conversations too. If there is something going on, say for instance with mom and stepdad is having an issue understanding that, maybe the stepdad is with you guys in those conversations and the doctor is the one who's giving him the information. So it's
Correct.
not just you being the one, um, you know like the bad guy, so to speak,
Yes.
but but the doctor is actually the person that's telling them that this is what's going on.
Most people, because most people do believe their physicians. I mean, their physicians are
Yeah.
the person that they believe over someone else. It doesn't matter.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
another question that we have from the audience: how can a long distance caregiver be proactive about check ins, and what can I do from afar?
Yeah. Check-ins with the caregiver and the family themselves. I would schedule and just put it on your calendar to say have a standing appointment, have a standing phone call with your parent, with your loved one, um, so that every Thursday afternoon at 4 o'clock, you guys have a phone call or a Zoom call or something, so you're able to maintain that communication, that you're checking in. And if it's about, medical things,
Yes.
same thing. I would say the same thing. Just every time you have those check-ins with your family, um, ask how the medical things are going. If there's been any changes, kind of document those and keep a log. And how can you be proactive from afar? Just make sure that you're making those calls. Make sure that you're checking in.
Yeah.
Prioritize that time. Anything you have to add to that, Stacey?
No, I would say that, it's like you said, it's all about the check-in. It's all about staying in tuned and informed of what's going on with your family member. So,
Hmm. Hmm. It
yes.
can be a challenge being that far away and not being
Oh,
able to be
yes, it
there hands
can.
on. um, so give yourself some grace as you go through the process. Give your family grace as they go through that process too. Just kind of establish some of those boundaries and ask your family members what would be most helpful for them. How can you be supportive and helpful from where you're at? And maybe that can be a conversation, that you guys can have, so that it's clear and you know what they need and you know how you can support them.
And I would also say making sure that if you're at the physician, that you have a right to speak for your family
Yeah,
member and get the medical information, because if not, there's been a lot of family members that may call, sorry, I cannot give you that information because you are not one who's added on to
the
to the
list. You
okay
can
so
have
that they can
the
have that information. Yeah, so most definitely.
Exactly.
So,
And that's
yeah.
that's super important too. And we're having
Hmm.
conversations around that at the beginning of the year right now too, is having those legal documents in place, those powers of
Correct.
attorneys, um, advanced healthcare directives, kind of looking at those and seeing if they're up to date. And if this is, from being a caregiver from afar and checking in with family, and that is something that you want to do, making sure that you have the proper, like you were saying, have the proper documentation so that you can make those phone calls from where you're at to the doctor's office to get that updated information.
Hmm. Leaning on your neighbors and
Yeah,
those who know
yeah,
your family, so family background. So,
exactly.
are there any more questions? Okay.
Okay.
Looks like we have
Well,
no more questions from the field. So,
thank you all so much for being here with us. We really appreciate your time and your energy and being here and being a part of the conversation with us. Know that the Caregiver Resource Centers in California are here to help support you. And if you have any questions or concerns or want to have more conversations about this, please give your local Caregiver Resource Center a call.
yes, thank you, Stephanie. It was great co hosting with you.
Same
Thank
to
you
you.
all.